Gorham is an actor best known for the ABC series Ugly Betty. He has also appeared in such series as Insatiable, Popular, Odyssey 5, Felicity, and Once Upon a Time. He is married to his former Popular co-star, Anel Lopez Gorham, and they have 3 children. At an early age, his son Lucas was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome. Chris is now an autism awareness advocate and has been quoted saying, "I don't think of Lucas as my son with Asperger's. I think of him as my son. He's not wrong. He's not broken. He is who he is." So, your son Lucas was diagnosed with Asperger syndrome at age 9. Can you tell us a little bit about his diagnosis and just briefly kind of the road that you and your wife had to kind of start and kind of journey your way through?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. So as far as like being diagnosed on the autism spectrum, he was diagnosed pretty late compared to a lot of kids. And that's because he, as a baby, as a toddler, he was always a little late hitting all the benchmarks, but just about the time when, their pediatrician would start to get concerned, then he'd hit it. And, Anel and I were both late bloomers as kids. And so, year after year, it kind of got written off to, oh, well, he's probably just a late bloomer. We got to kindergarten. We held him back a year because he was having a hard time. But then the second year through, he did really well. Things really started coming to a head about second grade. And that's about the age where, kids are just getting more sophisticated as their brains are developing. They're discovering sarcasm, nuance, like all of these. They start playing with things where they're not really, sometimes they don't say what they mean. Kids start to learn how to be mean, but in like sneakier ways, like kids do. And Lucas was really struggling with that because he did sarcasm just right over his head, and he started to gravitate towards the kids that were being mean to him because they were giving him attention. So that's really when. All along, especially my wife was kept asking the doctors, like, "Are you sure everything's fine?" And they kept getting reassured, "Yeah, everything's fine." But when this kind of stuff started to happen, it started becoming really clear to us that something was going on. But it took us a year and a half, maybe almost 2, to really finally find the right people to talk to finally get a proper assessment, to get that diagnosis that then made sense.
Right.
And I think, like a lot of parents that get, a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, it can be, it's totally life-changing because typically, unless you've been in a family that has autism in the family, people don't know anything about it, or and especially, 10 years ago now, Lucas is 19 now, so 10, 12 years ago, especially, like, the whole autism awareness movement and all of that stuff, like, it was just getting started, and it was really scary. And I think even now it's a scary diagnosis because as a parent, you have a lot of just expectations about what your child's life is going to be, what it's going to look like, mostly based on your own life experience, right? And when you are presented suddenly with the reality that your child's life is going to look different, that can be really scary. For me, a thing that really helped, again, me, not Lucas, because Lucas was still just Lucas, right? Like now he just had a piece of paper saying,
Right.
like defining him, but he didn't change. He's just the same kid. And thinking about it that way has always been really helpful to me, because it refocuses everything away from me as the dad, away from us as the parents, and onto him as a person. And reminding us, like, okay, well, he's not me. He's Lucas. This is who he is. I don't know what his life is going to look like. It's going to be different than mine. But I'm here to help. And that has always been really helpful. It doesn't, it still sometimes can be difficult, but I think a lot of at least the psychological struggles that parents go through frequently has to do with it's kind of our stuff mostly. Now that being said, there are very real worries, because the world is what it is. But it's also something that my wife Anel and I have kind of taken on is being a part of some of the solutions and really trying to not conform our kids into a square hole that they don't fit into, but instead trying to change the shape of the holes and make room for kids like ours and families like ours.
Absolutely. And so you'd mentioned Lucas is 19 now. So
Yes.
Where is he now as an 20-year-old, whenever his birthday is?
Almost. It's this month. He turns 20.
Okay, so there you go. I mean, I'll be 32 in less than a month. So where is he now in his life? Has, schooling, I mean, is he, 19, I would assume he's graduated from high school if he's still,
Yeah, he graduates this year. He's in his senior year right now. He's currently, physically right now, he's in his room in online school.
So tough, I know.
Yeah, well, it's funny because he's, school's always been stressful for him. It's, it's what a lot of he's got sensory needs, right? So crowds can be challenging, and the classroom environment can be challenging. So for him, the online school situation has been great, actually. It's been much easier. But he's doing well. He's going to graduate, and it's such a huge, it's a huge accomplishment. And it's one of those things where, when he was 9, there were plenty of people really trying to lower expectations. And, like a lot of people really unsure about whether like he would ever graduate from high school. And so it's huge. So we're really excited for him. And
that's really exciting. Yeah, when I was in grade school, I had a lot of academic difficulties because of my brain injury and cognitive deficits. And I went to a mainstream school. I was born and raised in New York, specifically Manhattan. So I went to an all-girls school on the Upper East Side. It's funny, I just actually posted something about this on my Facebook. But I went there for 13 years. I had the worst 13 years of my entire life. Academically, socially, I was bullied. I worked really hard. They had asked me to move or switch schools to a more special ed school. And my parents were like, no. But like how you and Anel feel, graduating for me was like a huge milestone. And I went off to college and, graduated and this and that. But it must be such a proud moment, or it's going to be such a proud moment.
It's great. But it's interesting because, talking about him as like a, now almost 20-year-old young man, it's been different, because I've been doing interviews about stuff like this, since he was 9. And when he was younger, we would talk a lot about like specifics about what was going on with him and like family dynamics and things like that. But a few years ago, I had a talk with him, and because we were asked to write an op-ed about this, basically, and I think it was early on in the pandemic, and I was, at first I said, oh yeah, no problem, I'm happy to do that, and then Anel and I were talking about it, and I need to talk to Lucas, because part of the reason was I thought maybe he would want to write this with me, and so I went up to talk to him about it, and he's wanted nothing to do with it, just nothing to do with it, and actually and he said, I don't, and again, he made it very clear, like he doesn't want us like talking about him and his life in public. And I get it, like it's the kind of thing where it was frustrating at first, because I feel like there's value to his perspective on this stuff. And I think there's a lot of people that would get a lot out of like hearing from him what he's going through and how he's dealing with it and how he feels about all this stuff. But like he's grown up, and if he doesn't want to talk about that stuff publicly, then we've made it really clear to him. It was like, okay, well then that's you, and it's your thing, and you're not little anymore, and so now we just kind of don't. So it's and it's a little, yeah, it's a little like it. At first, it made it a little tough to talk about this stuff, but then I kind of felt like just sharing that, I think, is also an important message to go out to folks, is that, as much as there are a lot of like adult, like self-advocates out there, autistic adults, adults with sensory needs, with mental health issues, with any disability, as the parent, I'm not the one with the disability. And if the person with the disability doesn't want to talk about it publicly, then I need to respect that. And I think other people should too.
I agree. Do you think, though, and yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. You have to respect your child's wishes. Some people are more open about it than others. But just from your background and being in Hollywood and being an actor and whatnot, do you think that's played any role in him wanting to hold back? Because it's a lot different to be in the public eye than
for sure
for a family, that's just a typical family, not in the public eye.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his whole life, like we go out and, people will come up to me, like
right.
The kids, anywhere we go, it happens. And so that's always been just a part of their life. And it's, it's weird. Like it's,
I get it.
Yeah, it's weird.
I get it.
So I'm sure it is part of the, his instinct to just to hold on to something, to have some privacy.
Yeah. Well, the privacy is important. I mean, I think I'm talking about like, obviously like you, as a celebrity and actor, like, everyone wants their own set of privacy, and there's only, so many people that are like open about it. I mean, I reach out to a ton of celebrities, and I do get some like, no, I don't want to do this. It's not like, so, it's a comfort level too.
Totally.
But yeah, and it's definitely an adjustment. I mean, you have to be like, your children, and well, Lucas is obviously part of your family, get used to the fact that, you're going to go out, and people are going to come and, get asked, oh, hi, Chris, like, I saw you in X, Y, and Z. I mean, my dad was in finance. He was a big finance guy, owned his own company and everything. But, as the daughter, I was kind of, and I'm an only child, like the spotlight, it's the complete opposite, but I get it. It's, it can be tricky. So Since Lucas was diagnosed and the world of Asperger's was now in your conscious, you and Anel's, what have you learned in terms of the misunderstandings of what Asperger's syndrome is, uh, and you know what it is and what it's not?
Right. How to answer that? I would say, I mean, what it is for our son is what it is for our son. There's this saying that gets used a lot, and I think it's really accurate, is if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. It can look very different from person to person. I think a part of it that gets talked about a lot are the sensory needs of folks on the spectrum, but even those vary wildly. It's part of what there's an organization that Anel and I got involved with about 2 years ago now called Culture City. This is one of our T-shirts. Here you go.
Great. I've looked up the website. It's wonderful.
Yeah. And the work that they've been doing, that organization was started by Julian Maha and Michelle Kong, two doctors who are married and had a son on the spectrum. And they saw a need that started with families being able to go out to public spaces and participate safely and comfortably. Because there was a big story. It started really with the Cleveland Cavaliers at their arena, where a family was coming to see a game, and their young son, who's on the spectrum, had a sensory overload situation, and the staff there reacted very negatively, and the family was kicked out of the arena. Oh, wow. And so what Culture City started doing, and it started there, was going in and training all the staff on how to recognize people with sensory needs. So not just people on the autism spectrum, but people with PTSD and any invisible disability. And so how to recognize folks like that, and then how to be helpful. So we provide, the most important piece of it really is the training, but also on the physical side, we provide sensory bags so that have noise canceling headphones, fidget tools, things like that to help these folks just take a break if they need it. We've since expanded. We work with a lot of NBA arenas, NFL stadiums, libraries, museums. So in some of these bigger venues, like for instance, just in the Tennessee Titans Stadium, we just opened a new sensory room where they actually build a physical room where folks can go, where the lights are dim, where it's quiet, so they can just get back to center. And then when they're ready, go back out into the arena and enjoy the event. It has continued to evolve from that, though, in ways that I'm super excited about. We just had a board meeting last night with, and a couple of the attendees were the chief of police and the mayor of Salt Lake City. Wow. Because, oh gosh, 6 months ago, I want to say, like within the last year, Salt Lake City had one of these horrible events where, a mom called the police for help with her son who's on the spectrum, who is having a crisis at their home. And the police showed up, and instead of helping and de-escalating, ended up shooting this boy at his house. So Joe Ingles, who's on the Utah Jazz, he and his wife Renee, they have an autistic son as well, and he immediately started making phone calls, and Culture City was brought in and has trained 99% of all the first responders in Salt Lake City, including the police, fire and the 911 operators. And the meeting last night was to tell us about how they've already seen success from this training, about how they had an instance where there was a man with a history of mental health issues that the Salt Lake PD was aware of, showed up at their building and was told them that he wanted them to kill him, that he wanted to die by police gunfire. And it was a situation that very quickly could have escalated to something like that. But one of the officers there talked to the mayor afterwards and said the reason that it didn't was specifically because all of them had just recently been through this Culture City training. And so they made different choices. And the important part is like he said, they made choices that seemed counterintuitive and felt counterintuitive to their traditional training. But they did it anyway, and there were no shots fired. So not only do you have, the man who's in crisis who is still alive, you also have these officers who have not shot someone. And so it's huge. And so the mayor was telling us, like, she's never been told by an officer that any specific training has made such a big and such a very like a specific difference in behavior. So it's gone really well there. And since then, Fort Worth, Texas has come on board and is going to get the same training. And then Anel and I, we're about to start doing some advocacy for the Isaías Cervantes family here in Los Angeles, because it's a very similar story where Rosa Padilla, who is the mother, called the LA sheriff, called 911 because her son, who's 25, who's autistic and deaf, was having a crisis. And in the past, the police had come out and had been able to de-escalate. And this time the police came in and within a few minutes of them being there, shot him in the back through his spinal cord on his living room floor with his family watching. It's just every autistic parent's nightmare, right? Like any parent of a kid on the spectrum, this is your nightmare, where you need help and the help comes and makes it infinitely worse. And so we're really hoping that that we can get the LA Sheriff's Department, LAPD, all the first responders here in Southern California to get the same training that we've done in Salt Lake. Not that it's a magic pill that's going to fix all of law enforcement, but because it doesn't and it won't. But we've seen the evidence where we've done it and it can make it better. And I'll take better.
Of course, who doesn't?
Yeah.
And those organizations, in Culture City, they're only advancing, in the works that, you and Anel do, as well as other celebrities and just people in general. It's only going to make people's lives with Asperger syndrome, people on the autism spectrum disorder, and really any disorder better.
Well, that's the thing. It's the whole mission. It's not about fixing these kids, or fixing these adults. It's about making room because there's room.
Of course.
It's about educating people and training people and making places acceptable and making these people and these families feel accepted.
Yeah, absolutely. Like your, inclusion for all, like the start of your, your t-shirt. Inclusion, we can't negate these disorders. They are, it's part of life, that some people are, affected with. So it's really important work. What do you think has helped you the most as a father
to kind of navigate Lucas's journey and just, Asperger syndrome in general?
Um, well, if I'm honest, the thing that's helped the most is that I have remained mostly employed throughout all of this and can afford, and I'm not in like financial crisis. I, because therapies are expensive. They're for the most part not covered by insurance. All of the things that you need to be a good parent, much less a good parent to a kid that has, that's autistic, that has a disability, that needs more help than a typical kid. What it requires is things like patience, right? What it requires is presence. Somebody has to be there. The person that's there needs to feel good about themselves, needs to feel supportive, needs breaks, needs rest. It can be really challenging. And, I think part of the reason why there's a high divorce rate for parents, with kids with disabilities. And I think it's not because of the kids, it's because there's not enough support for these parents. And they get tired. And when you get tired, you're not your best self. You're not your best self for your partner. You're not your best self for your kids. And so honestly, the thing that's most helped me as a parent is just the fact that I have been able to have a job and earn enough money to pay for my family and feel good about myself. The fact that I have a partner that loves and supports me helps me be a good dad. And it's, if we were able to support these families so that everyone just had a baseline of just feeling stable, it would make just a world of difference.
I would agree. I don't talk about this often, only because it's not a situation for everybody, but for you and I mean, well, for you with Lucas, and then me and my parents. Yeah, my parents fortunately have had the financial means and continuously have the financial means to support me and do therapy and get therapies and whatnot, because a lot of this stuff is not covered by insurance. And I think it's an advantage to Lucas and your family and my family, but there's so many people that the financial burden, as well as patience, as well as acceptance and so forth, it's really hindered. And I do think you're right that the divorce rate, it's not because of the child, but
No. Well, frankly, I mean, look, I don't know that it's even that much higher with these families. Divorce is about 50% anyway. But like, even with that, I would say that I would be willing to, like, what do they say? The biggest reasons for divorce is money.
Yeah, of course.
Right? It's like, because if you're not stable, like if you can't pay your bills, like that anxiety alone can be crushing. And then you add kids into the mix, it's a lot. It's a lot.
No, for sure. I mean, it's just
huge.
tough. I mean,
It's really, really tough. And it's, it gets into, our economy and just society and where we are as a country. But,
right.
It's the whole, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps myth. I mean, have you ever tried that? Like, stand in a pair of boots and try to pull yourself off the ground by your bootstraps. It's physically, literally, and impossible.
Yeah, I haven't.
You can't do it. You're standing in them. Like, that's why it's like a joke. Like, it's
no, you're right.
We all need help and support, and having, again, it's just, the question started like, what's been the most helpful thing for you? Is, as a dad, it's like stability.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure.
having some stability. I mean, and I'm an actor, so that's not the most stable career, and it definitely hasn't been like it's like this, you know,
Right.
but
But
the
still,
through line is fairly stable.
yeah, which is really important.
Yeah.
So what advice or tips would you give to parents that are just starting out this process with a child or a caregiver, I should say, starting out?
Sure. I would say, well, listen, I can just kind of remembered back to what my feelings were, and I felt like I needed to get all the answers immediately. I felt like there was a clock ticking, and I needed to get all the answers immediately, and I needed to get it figured out because if I act even, you know, a week too late, it's going to set back his development by years, and I might miss it. And so what I would encourage parents to do is just take a deep breath, and know that that is not true, that it is okay to take your time, breathe, figure things out, ask questions, and just remember that your kid is the exact same kid that he was, or she was, the day before you got that news. Um, you know, getting a diagnosis like this, um, at its best, you know, helps to give you a roadmap, and a direction to point and a direction to look for answers, for guidance, for role models. Um, but it's okay to take your time and figure out what's going to be right for you and your family, because it's, you know, every kid is different, every family's different, and just because something worked for one kid or one family doesn't mean it's going to be the right thing for you.
Absolutely. I mean, every person, like you said, is different and every situation is different. You can only just like mix everything quote unquote together from all the advice that you get
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you know, professional, you know, whatever wisdom and so forth. A Boy Called Poe. It's an amazing film. You did a great job with it.
Oh, thanks.
And yeah, really, it really mimics a little bit of you know, your personal life with Lucas, although
Yeah,
from what I
different, but it's the, you know,
a
it's
it's different,
in the
but you
ballpark.
know, a little bit. Um, so for anyone who's watching or obviously listening, you play the father in a movie called A Boy Called Poe. Can you tell us a little bit about the film?
Yeah. So the movie is based on a true story. It's based off of a real relationship between a dad and his son after he lost his wife. Um, and it's about, you know, these two people trying to find each other again and like figure out how to move on after the trauma of losing your wife and losing your mom. Um, it's and it's written by, you know, by this dad who this happened to. It was directed by John Asher, who has an autistic son. And actually, when I sat down to meet with John about the part, I assumed that he knew that I also had a son on the spectrum, and was really surprised to learn that he didn't. Um, and so the thing that I loved about the script was that I felt like it wasn't afraid to show how we fail as parents, specifically as dads. Um, it wasn't just a feel-good story about how this dad does everything right. Um, it shows the moments where he falls really short, of the kind of dad he wants to be. Sorry, it makes me emotional. Because, you know, those are the moments that don't go on Instagram.
Right.
You know, the moments where you just, where you're not a good dad, or you blow it. And, you know, I have had many of those moments, and they just don't get talked about very much. and you don't see them too much in media. And I just thought, like, this is such a great opportunity to make this movie to not just more actually for families that aren't living with this, because the families that are living with this, we all know, but for the typical families, the neurotypical families, to get a peek to see kind of what it's like, the good and the bad, because it's both. It's like anything. So the production was filled with, folks with family members on the spectrum, and all trying to kind of tell this story in a real way, and also to kind of tackle with some creativity what they think, one version of what might be going on in the mind of a kid like Poe in this movie, because he has moments where to his dad and the outside world, he just kind of checks out, right? The way we physicalize it, he puts his mom's scarf over his head, and he goes into his imagination, and in his imagination, it's just an entirely different world. Excuse me. Who knows whether, we don't know what's really going on, but it was a way to try and imagine kind of how he's dealing with things in a way that's creative. And anyway, it's a nice film. It's a simple movie, but I think it tells the story, I think, in a pretty honest way. So I'm proud to be part of it.
Yeah. Now, did Poe actually have, in real life, did he have autism?
The actor? No.
Okay.
No, his name's Julian Fetter. No, he worked really closely with John for about 6 months, like workshopping stuff, and he did a great job.
Yeah, no, he did a great job. It's a great film. I'd recommend it to anybody. Okay, so this is the fun stuff, but what is the best part about being Lucas's dad?
Oh, now you're gonna make me cry.
Oh God, I'm getting you emotional.
I know, I can't help it. It's the thing I think that's so cool about just being a parent anyway, is of all my kids, is like, you're really the only, like Anel and I, like, we're the only ones who have seen them from the beginning. We're the only ones that really know how they started. I mean, like, you don't even remember, like, anything before you're like 3 or 4.
I was born with it, but I don't.
Right, and like not much before you're probably 15. Like, you don't.
Of course.
It's all like
stuff.
Of course. And so, seeing where he started and just how far he's, you're just filled with love and pride. It's just, it's the coolest.
Yeah. No. I mean, Lucas is awesome. I don't even know him, but I can just tell, from what you've told me and what I've seen, and your family's adorable. And this is now just geared towards all your children, and you can talk also, and you can always talk about Anel's perspective from what you know.
Good, she loves when I speak for her.
Yeah. So, what have you learned? Obviously there's been Lucas, but just, raising your children, in general. And also, I guess you can talk a little bit about, we talked a little bit about this, but being in the, you and, you being in the spotlight of LA, which is Hollywood crazy, because it's an adjustment, but it's also a different way of living than a lot of other people outside of the Hollywood LA world. Yeah,
Anel and I have never really, we've kind of shied away from all that stuff from the beginning, like even before we had kids. You know, I mean, we were married. I mean, we were engaged when I started working on Popular. We were working
Right.
on Popular together. We got married that first year on that show. Like, we were never like out in the clubs, like never really like hunting publicity or any of that stuff. And certainly after we had kids. I think for all things considered, our kids have been pretty sheltered from a lot of that.
That's good.
The boys have seen more of it just because I was on shows that were more high profile, and it was kind of a different time when they were younger.
They're boys and you're their dad. It's a little different than a mother-son relationship too.
Yeah, well, it's also because like when I was Ugly Betty through Covert Affairs was kind of the time when I was most like doing interviews and in the media and going to award shows and and things like that and taking publicity trips to New York to promote the show and all that stuff. And so I would take one of the boys on those trips sometimes. And
Fun.
yeah, it was really fun. And so they were exposed to a lot more of it. And for Alo, for my daughter, it's been much quieter for her. She's seen a lot less of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've done a pretty good job of keeping them for the most part away from that. That being said, it's weird. None of my kids like watching me on television or in movies. Like it's weird for them to see their dad not being their dad.
Right.
Like they just think it's weird.
Yeah.
So
Because the roles that you play are completely different than who you are in real life.
Yeah,
And obviously, there could be some overlap, because there's overlaps in people.
Yeah,
but it's
yeah,
different.
yeah. Overall, aside from
You guys are a typical family. It doesn't.
we're pretty boring.
You're so funny. It's very interesting because when I was doing my research on your advocacy work, obviously, obviously because of your son Lucas and so forth, despite all your high profile roles, I actually was a little bit shocked to find that there were not as many and I could totally be wrong because maybe I didn't do enough like digging. But videos just on certain, it doesn't have to be on Lucas and your advocacy, but the amount was, from what I found, was pretty minimal, which kind of just shows a little bit more about like just kind of how the private, quote unquote, to a certain degree, like, family you are. And I think that's wonderful, especially being an actor.
Yeah, I think early on, I would guess, during Ugly Betty and, like early in Covert Affairs, we would get approached fairly regularly by magazines, by shows that wanted to do kind of specials on us with Lucas, on like raising a kid with autism and all this stuff. And, it always just felt, it's funny, I'm glad that we erred on the side of caution now, because now that he's, advocating for himself and basically saying like, I don't want to be in that spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of my instinct when he was younger too. It was like, I was hesitant about putting him in that spotlight. And it's like, he's not asking to be the face of autism, like I would rather he just be Lucas and like have his life, and when he grows up, if he wants to advocate for that, then he absolutely can. We'll support him 100%, but I don't want to force that on him.
No, absolutely. You have to let him be, free. And technically he's not a minor anymore. Well, not technically, he's not a minor anymore.
No, he's grown.
Yeah, he's grown. Does he know what he wants to do with his life? He's still so young.
Oh yeah, no, he's figuring it out.
Yeah. Especially during COVID, and I feel so bad. graduation and everything. It's not a fun time for those that are growing up and having all these monumental moments, and there's virtual events of all different sorts.
Yep.
But all your children will find their way. So lastly, what has been the biggest piece of advice that you've ever been given? I guess more geared towards Asperger syndrome and just, being a parent uh, to someone who obviously has their differences.
Right.
Um, there's probably so much,
Yeah,
but
but like the stuff that sticks, and I don't know who, it's probably multiple people have said this at multiple times, but it's just to remind yourself that um, you do the best you can with what you have. When you know better, you do better. Um, be patient, not just with your kids, but with yourself. Um, when you fail, and you will, make sure you're all, make sure you're learning how to forgive yourself for those failures, and then, work to not make those same mistakes again.
right.
Basically just like, don't be so hard on yourself. Just, do the best you can, and that's gonna be enough. It's the thing, life's hard enough as it is.
I know. This was great, Chris. You're amazing.
Oh, thanks.